thing up is, I believe, our immediate past president Shiketti is going to talk about the listening tour report and recommendations.
Thank you, President Tolleson. 3 years ago, I had the pleasure of attending a couple of listening tour events, I believe, with President Furlong. The next year I followed up and did a few with President Pickett. Found both, while somewhat more of a debate fashion, particularly with President Pickett. It was a civil, very nice debate, CLE, perhaps even with local bar associations. And I think they enjoyed the kind of going back and forth on various things. But I loved doing them. They were fascinating for so many different reasons that, you know, you got to meet people who you've never met before all across the state. Just a wonderful opportunity to meet your membership and you know, part of the legal community in very different areas. And so I was really looking forward to the listening tour. And I knew that I think President Pickett went to 23 different counties, and I had designs on doing all 39 if we could do it. And Executive Director Nevitt would roll her eyes at me, but you know, I was excited about it. And then COVID hit, and unfortunately we couldn't do nearly as many as I would have liked. We did visit Coupeville, a place that I've never been to before, even though I've lived my entire life in Washington. Some of these places I had never visited. South Bend and Mount Vernon, and then Spokane, and then we did a virtual listening tour with Asotin, Columbia, and Garfield counties. Without exception, they were fascinating, wonderful people, different perspectives on different things. We learned a little bit about the various communities that we visited. We updated them on what the WSBA was doing, what our long-range strategic planning council was doing, what our small town and rural practice communities committee was doing. They had questions about such things as the bar exam and diploma privilege, and the mandatory malpractice insurance and the alternatives to that being insurance disclosure. So we gave them updates on those things, the MCLE, other issues. And then as the title suggests, we listened, so listening tour. And some of the things that folks were telling us, were contrary to what we heard, common perceptions. Some things were consistent with what we're hearing from others. A lot of the discussion, of course, because we were in rural areas, was on retention of attorneys in areas where there's not a lot of attorneys, and they're not very highly populated areas, and it's hard to keep and retain people. One gathering that we had in South Bend, they said it's really not an access to justice issue for them because, and this was good to hear, they're small community, they all know each other and they look out for each other. And so if somebody has a need and it's not being fulfilled, somebody will step up and fulfill that need. So it's not an access to justice issue for them. It's more of a retention issue. And sometimes it's not the attorney that's causing the attorney that comes out and practices. Sometimes it's the spouse that follows and then decides, this is not the area for me, I want to go back someplace else. And so we explained to them that the Small Town and Rural Practice STAR Committee is going to be looking into that. seeing what can be done. In the materials on page 175, you'll see our memo. And there was a number of things that were shared that, perhaps one idea that was suggested was, rather than trying to bring people in to these small communities, maybe you raise them, you go into the high schools, you get them excited about law school, or you introduce them to the law clerk program, and you grow them within the communities. And so then hopefully they stay in their hometown, which is a really interesting idea. And maybe that's the way to do it. But there are concerns out there. Other communities had suffered through downturns in the economy and industry, and were suffering because of that. Some of the folks were apprehensive about the future with retirements and who was going to fill the shoes of the folks who were leaving the practice. Was there enough work to do? Or there's enough work to do, but not enough people to do it. And I think that was pretty consistent with all of the places. There was no lack of work. And if somebody wanted to be in those communities and devoted themselves, there was more than enough work to go around, and they could have a very good practice, which was also encouraging to hear. So in your materials, like I said, there's a memo. We promised to take all of the information that we gathered, put it into a memo, and then share it with the Long Range Strategic Planning Council, the Small Town and Rural Practice Committee, and other committees and boards that could benefit from this information. And I highly recommend that next year, maybe an earlier start, maybe even think about other ways, Zoom meetings, some way of continuing the listening tour. Because like I said, I found it extraordinarily rewarding, very fascinating, different perspectives, lots of folks that want to put their heads together to try to solve problems they see in their communities and the problems they see in other communities. And so it was very uplifting for me. Wish we could have done more of it. And so that's basically my report. Unless the Executive Director, Nevitt, do you have anything to add?
The only thing I would add, I guess two things I would add, and I'll note for the record that I enjoy them very much also, and I would have loved to get to every county despite my eye rolling. One thing I want to add, we often focus on the constructive feedback that we receive, which I think is appropriate because we want to improve, and that's the point of going out. But I also wanted to note that you can read in the memo some of the appreciations that we heard, and we do hear those, and they're unprompted. There's always a lot of appreciation for the legal lunchbox and a lot of the other services that we provide to the members. So I wanted to highlight that. And then the other thing that I thought was really unique, and it's you'll find it not only in the memo, but in point 5 in our recommendations is, of course, we heard some gripes about the what it's like to be in discipline. And that's understandable because it's not fun to be, to be in that process. But what I was really excited about is we had a really interesting conversation about how you might address that feeling that people have, because the reality is our Chief Disciplinary Counsel and the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, their job is to prosecute these issues. And yet there's a sense that people would like to feel a little more supported in the process. And so one thing that I thought was interesting is the idea of exploring a model for providing some more support, not through the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, but perhaps through our member services function. Maybe we could have assigned counsel, maybe we could have volunteer counsel, or maybe we could just have a portion of the bar that provides information, advice, and support. So I thought that was something really interesting to explore. Obviously a big issue and would be a big investment, but I thought it was a nice solutions-oriented discussion.
have hands up, Governor Bell, followed by Governor Pertzer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was going to just kind of dovetail off the comments from past President Cicchetti about the activities of the STAR Committee and how it can dovetail in with the listening tour. And the listening tour is a wonderful opportunity to hear from our members, and to the extent that a long-term criticism of this organization has been that we're too I-5 kind of downtown Seattle centric, I think the STAR Committee is a helpful, constructive response to those concerns. And I'm pleased to say that we have had our first meeting. It comprises very fired up, very dedicated members of the profession serving on the committee. They've got some interesting, dynamic and ideas that have the possibility of getting some real traction here. I'm excited to see what they will come forward with in the next year. But I do hope the listening tour continues and that the STAR Committee's existence and work can be one of the items that can be showcased to our members in these areas that are outside the downtown Seattle area. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Bell. Governor Pertzer.
Yes, thank you. I would just I would echo what Governor Abel and past President Cicchetti said, but these listening tours I think are helpful for the members because it takes it outside of the Seattle I-5 corridor area, and I think people acknowledge and like to see that we're involved. It's not just a centrally located group of individuals that get together, but there's an interest in other lawyers and frankly in some of the counties that may feel a little bit left out, and that's certainly in my district. Getting out toward the peninsula, there's a lot of folks that are out there, but there's not a lot of, unfortunately, they might feel a little bit left out. So to the extent that you can, I'd encourage all the governors to participate in these listening tours. I think they're really helpful because we want to be more involved with the community at large and the bar community at large. And there's nothing that harms that at all by being more involved with those groups.
Thank you, Governor Pertzer. Governor Adewale.
Thank you. I agree with what everyone has said, but I want to say that the work for this member outreach programs should situate within the member engagement committee. And that's one of the things that hopefully we are able to do to get members excited about how positive, about having a positive image of WISBA and having a positive image of our profession. And I think that in addition to STAR, we also need to continue to work with member engagement and look at strategies upon that we can use to roll out some of these programs and ideas so that members will be able to provide input to the bar, and the bar would also, the Board of Governors will also be able to at least get some feedback during these tours. So some of the questions that arose out of our members' survey can be part of the conversations, the agenda that will be put before the whoever is going to be doing this outreach. But I think that we need to work with the member engagement committee. And I also want to say one last thing. There is only one state, and majority of our members come from the I-5 corridor. While we are also doing outreach in those areas, we also need to be mindful of the fact that we need to engage members in the I-5 corridor too. So thank you.
Thank you, Governor Abell. Governor Higginson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I echo the comments of Governor Adewale. I think that the listening tour, in my mind, has been less than effective over the last few years. I've never understood why the president and the executive director go out at the end of the president's term, when it seems to me that if the president is wanting information on how to guide his or her policies that they hope will be enforced by the board or brought into being by the board, they need to know before the end of their term what the members want. So that's never made any sense to me. I actually think it's kind of an expense that could be better diverted to the member engagement committee, for example. And it seems to me that that would be a much more effective way of finding out what the members want. And if the member engagement committee wants to recommend to the board that some group of people go out to the different bar associations, the different groups of people, and or we have kind of a town hall meeting by Zoom and invite, say, the people from Skagit County for one meeting and the people from San Juan County for another meeting, or however we're going to do that. That would be great too. But I really think we kind of need to rethink this whole listening tour thing, which I have seen it both just as an attorney when Paula Littlewood and a couple of presidents came to Friday Harbor, and then I've seen it now as a governor, and I haven't been impressed with it on any front. So if it's going to be effective in terms of collecting feedback about what members think, I think there needs to be a different way of doing it. And I really like Governor Adewale's idea that it somehow be processed as part of the member engagement committee process. Sorry, I don't mean to be negative about that to anyone, and I'm not pointing at anyone in particular. It's just that it isn't a very useful way to spend time and money. And we don't get a very representative sampling because not that many people turn out for these things by and large. So if we want more feedback, let's figure out a better way to get it. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Higginson. Anybody else have any comments? So I believe we finished that agenda item.